You know, according to former First Lady Ms. Rosalind Carter, who is one of my favorite family caregivers and advocate caregivers, in her book, Helping Yourself, Help Others, she said there are only 4 kinds of people in the world. Those who have been caregivers, those who are currently caregivers, those who will be caregivers, and those who will need caregivers. And I have to tell you, truer words about caregiving have never been spoken. And my name is Gary, and I'm a caregiver. I'm also, as Leslie said, the founder and editor-in-chief of today's Caregiver magazine, as well as the author of the books, The Fearless Caregiver and The Caregiving Ties That Bind. You know, in the past, the challenge was that we caregivers were just seen as the family members waiting in the corner, the person pushing the wheelchair by the healthcare system. And this is why we created the Fearless Caregiver Conferences, to do everything we can to support the person who is in so many cases the real healthcare decision maker, the family caregiver. My own personal journey as a family caregiver started 23 years ago as I helped my mom care for my dad, who retired in 1990 at the age of 59, and within 3 months was diagnosed with bone marrow cancer. Mom went from business partner, traveling partner, best friend for 50 years and spouse to being a full-time caregiver as Dad's condition worsened. He passed away a year and a half later, and immediately afterwards, Mom became caregiver for her own parents, who are dealing with, respectively, cancer, Alzheimer's, diabetes, strokes. At the time, I was living in a different state, and I would speak with her on the phone every week. And she never asked me to return home to South Florida in the house that I grew up in, next to the house that Leslie grew up in, where my mom had still lived. But, you know, I heard in her voice, and I heard this distress during one of our weekly conversations, that things were not as rosy as she had been presenting to me, myself and my brother, who lived a few states away. The year was 1994, and I was living in Atlanta, Georgia. And Mom had been primary caregiver first for Dad, and then after he passed away for my grandparents, as they needed her care over those past few years. And during those years, I would return home at least once every 6 weeks, or my brother would return home to help in whatever way we could. But this late August night in 1994, I really heard something in her voice that made me realize more was needed, and fast. And I was able to immediately spend 2 weeks in Miami, where Mom and the rest of my family lived. You know, I thought I was going to help Mom make some decisions, be there to support her, and then return home to where I was living in Atlanta. But within hours of returning back home to Miami, I found myself racing around town with Mom, helping her do all she needed as a family caregiver. We were in and out of doctor's offices, endless hours on the phone with insurance companies, midnight dashes to the emergency room. It was life and death decisions for both grandparents, heartaches and stresses for Mom and for myself. At the end of my time in Miami, I remember sitting at dinner at Mom's house the night before I was to leave and go back to Atlanta, and I, you know, told her that I was so grateful to be able to come home during these specific 2 weeks of intense and overwhelming challenges. And she looked at me dumbfounded, because to me, what was the most intense, painful series of life and death answers that had to be dealt with for people I loved my whole life, to her was just a regular 2 weeks in the life of a family caregiver. So I went back to Atlanta, gathered my belongings, and moved back to Miami to become what I want to call a caregiver's caregiver. I was dedicated in helping her in any way possible as she continued to care for her folks, my grandparents. And I quickly realized we were not alone, and not by a long shot. We would find plenty of other people like us, all rushing around trying to do the best for the loved ones with little or no information, but always with enough time to share whatever information they learned, which they thought would be of value to their fellow caregivers. And we've been endeavoring to support and offer advice and support the family caregivers since the very first issue of today's Caregiver magazine rolled off the presses in 1995. some of the studies that have happened over these past 20 years have really kind of confirmed everything we thought about what we were going through as family caregivers. And one in particular was done a few years ago by AARP, the National Family Caregivers Association, which I thought really makes sense. One of the greatest challenges to support family caregivers in our role as we effort to support our loved ones is self-identification. We really don't see ourselves as caregiver. We're the loving parent and a dedicated daughter. We're going to work 40 hours a week. We're working, we have other family members. We have kids we have to care for, and we're doing family caregiving round the clock, 7 days a week. But we don't see ourselves as family caregivers. And the challenge is, if you don't self-identify, if you don't reach out for help as a family caregiver, if you don't have a ready-made support system, according to this AARP National Family Caregivers Association survey, where they surveyed thousands of family caregivers, they found that you cannot be as effective as possible in your caregiving role. You are less likely to navigate the complex and overwhelmingly baffling healthcare and social service systems adeptly. You're less likely to stand up for your own welfare and the welfare of your loved one, and frankly, you're more likely to, more prone to physical and mental illnesses. At this very moment, more than 65 million people, or 29% of the U.S. population, provide care for a chronically ill, disabled, or aged family member, and spend an average of 20 hours per week providing care for their loved ones, and 13% of family caregivers provide 40 hours of care or more every week. And this recent caregiving study, it's conducted by the MDF, which I thought was terrific. If you get a chance to look at the study, it's amazing. It found that 50% of the caregivers who responded to the survey are providing cares to their children, and the vast majority of them are adult children. So one of my favorite books in caregiving is actually one of my favorite books because of the first lines in the entire book. It's not necessarily a caregiving book, but these three little words told me everything I needed to know about caregiving. The book was A Road Less Traveled by Scott Peck. And once I read these three little words, I got my money's worth without going any further. And as you could see, the three little words, the first sentence in the book is, life is difficult. Well, okay, I got it. I love the book, but I didn't have to read any further. That's it. Life is difficult. Except I'd go further and say that a caregiver's life is exceptionally difficult. I can't imagine a single caregiver who does not wish things were different. We all wish things were different. And why not? The statistics really bear this out. The average caregiver will be responsible for the directed expenditure of $40,000 to $47,000 a year. And out of pocket, almost 10% of our annual salary. We're going to lose over $600,000 in opportunities and promotions during the lifetime of our own career. And the MDF survey that I referred to earlier also found that 38% of caregiver respondents had to quit or limit their employment due to the caregiving needs of their family. So why do we do it? Because we can't not do it. Because our loved ones need us. Because we never even asked ourselves if there was any other way. Because it's who we are. So now what? How do we go from being a loving spouse or parent or dedicated daughter to being a dietitian, therapist, insurance specialist, medical expert, chauffeur, psychologist, pharmacist, and incontinence expert? And keep our relationship with our loved ones, friends and neighbors, not to mention our jobs, which a third of us end up losing. I firmly believe the way that we achieve all of our goals as caregivers is, in fact, by taking on a new job role. This is one I like to call being a fearless caregiver. A fearless caregiver is a caregiver who understands that they have a job to do as a full member of their loved one's care team. You're no less important than the case manager, the therapist, and yes, even the doctor. You all have jobs to do, and yours as the fearless caregiver is to learn all you can about your loved one's situation and act as their advocate. We're not only there to represent our loved ones, but also put a human face to them. And this is a crucial role, because no matter how much they care, our doctors see at least 35 patients a day. Our case managers and therapists have larger caseloads than ever, and other members of a hospital or care facilities team have probably never even laid eyes on your loved one. Over the years, I've spoken with thousands of other caregivers, and one thing has become crystal clear. A caregiver can be heard in today's healthcare system, and we can be listened to. We found a minimum of 3 significant common traits among these caregivers who are being heard and listened to and respected by the healthcare system. First, you got to believe you can make a difference. Second, you see your role in your loved one's care as being just as important as any other member of their professional care team. And you hear me saying other member, because I truly believe you are the linchpin member of your loved one's professional care team and need to be treated with respect by the team and vice versa. And third, you ask questions. You ask lots of questions. You research, and you do not easily take anybody's no for an answer. You become a fearless caregiver. A fearless caregiver is one who asks questions of your doctors and does not rest until you receive clear and concise answers. A fearless caregiver knows their rights concerning their loved one's insurance plan and is able to fight to exercise those rights. A fearless caregiver is one who knows how to find the latest treatment options and present qualified research to the members of your loved one's care team. And frankly, a fearless caregiver is a member of your loved one's care team. And yet, you know what the very first step to such care is? It's we caregivers learning to care for ourselves. And I know, I hear every caregiver out there saying, okay, now he lost me. I thought he knew what he was talking about, but obviously he doesn't, because I don't have time to care for me. Everything I'm doing, my entire day, my entire week, my entire life is to care for my loved one. I spend all my time caring for him or her, forget about caring for me. And my answer to that is, okay, I get it. I understand. You don't want to care for yourself, and I'll accept that. As long as you can tell me who you have waiting in the wings to take over and care for both you and your loved one when you take ill due to exhaustion or simply not caring for yourself. And no one's ever taken me up on that offer, actually. See, job one for any caregiver is to make sure you're taken care of too. We caregivers must learn all we can about the disease or illness our loved one is battling. Because in this case, knowledge is truly power. But we must also learn all we can about our role as family caregiver. And again, in the MDF study on caregiving, 44% of respondents said that they did not have the necessary emotional resources to handle caregiving. That's an honest statement. Just as social workers, I think the place to start is to see ourselves as an equal member of the loved one's care team. And so what do our care team members have? Well, they have their code of ethics, you know, the social workers. They have their Florence Nightingale pledge, the nurses. Doctors have their Hippocratic oath. We caregivers want to see ourselves as full members of the care team. We also need to have a set of principles to live by. And we developed this set of 10 principles we call the Fearless Caregiver Manifesto. And it can be found on caregiver.com. But I want to share with a few of these principles with you in the time we have together. The first one, as I think is really important, is I will fearlessly seek out other caregivers or care organizations and join an appropriate support group. I realize the strength in numbers and will not isolate myself from those who are also caring for the loved ones. Now, for anybody who counsels family caregivers, it's important to understand that many of us are hesitant to take advantage of support groups for a few reasons. First, it's difficult for us to face the issues of our own caregiving. So to tell us to sit in a room with people who are discussing their caregiving challenges seems like the very last thing we'd want to do. And many caregivers feel that support groups are just a room of people whining about their problems. And of course, we know nothing is further from the truth. In fact, many caregivers learn to see their support groups as some of the only people they can open up to. I like to call them their family of choice. So my suggestion is to say to a family caregiver, if you trust me, I want you to take a leap of faith. And this is what I ask anybody who is a caregiver and doesn't want to go to support group. Find an appropriate well-led support group and go 3 times. And 3 times, because the first time it may actually just seem as you're walking into a room of people whining about their situations, because you've stepped into an intimate setting of people talking about their own situations that you know nothing about. They're very involved. It's like parachuting into a holiday dinner in the middle of the country with a family you don't know. Of course it's going to be difficult. You're going to feel off, but everybody is talking and interacting. The second time, it may be a little uncomfortable for a caregiver, but I've never seen a caregiver go to an appropriate, well-led support group 3 times and not walk out telling all their friends about this new fantastic thing they've discovered called support groups. We actually present a Fearless Caregiver Award to a family caregiver in every city that we host the Fearless Caregiver Conference. And a few years ago in Los Angeles, the winner came up to accept her award and started to tell her personal story, which was very, very similar to the leap of faith concept. And she actually pointed to the table of 10 people she was sitting with, and it was her entire support group. And they came to support her as she got the award. Quick word on support groups. As I mentioned, my dad retired in '90 at the age of 59, and soon afterwards developed bone marrow cancer. And although he was extremely gregarious guy and loved nothing more than learning about the people he would meet, unfortunately, convincing him that spending time in a support group of others who are dealing with cancer as well would be of value to him seemed unlikely. Although, as I said, he was a great guy, he was also a tough old Marine, and there was no way he was going to deal with this sitting around and talking to other people about things that personal. Forget it. So I would spend time on the phone with him, and we would talk. I knew he was still not telling me everything, but one evening when I was living in North Carolina at this time, and I was watching the NBC Nightly News, and Tom Brokaw always ended his program with a personal interest story. He chose to do a piece on the value of cancer support groups. And they cut away to a support group in my hometown of Miami. And you have to imagine my surprise when I saw my dad on the television screen in the middle of a lively discussion with his fellow support group members. He hadn't told me, but he joined the local support group a few months later, and NBC came and shot that just as an example of a support group. And I called him and I said, Tom Brokaw had to tell me you were going to support group. And I'll tell you, when he died 6 months later, every member of that support group who could was standing by his graveside. They really developed such an important bond. Another one is, I will fearlessly care for my physical and emotional health as well as I care for my loved ones. I will recognize a sign of my own exhaustion and depression, and I will allow myself to take respite breaks and to care for myself on a regular basis. And one place I think we all fall short when we advocate and speak to and counsel family caregivers is a lot of people say, oh, just get away, go take care of yourself, get respite, take a cruise. And they're all great notions, but I know that what a family caregiver is thinking is that person doesn't know what they're talking about because I can't possibly get away. I have medications to give. If I leave the house, my son won't allow anyone else to feed him. I'm irreplaceable. And I really do understand that feeling. And I do know that we caregivers are prone to take ourselves out of the all-important circle of care. We spend time making sure our loved ones get all the respite they need, but we don't ever get more than a few hours of night of sleep, if that much. We make sure our loved ones have all the medical attention they need, but I hate to ask for a show of hands of, who's gone to their own basic checkup in the last few months. We make sure our loved ones get all the nutrition they need, do anything we can to create the nutritional meals that they need to eat, but we grab bites that we order through windows, the drive-in at 11 o'clock at night through a clown's mouth. We grab whatever we can because we take ourselves out of the circle of care. And so what I want to tell to any professional caregiver who's listening, we caregivers really are not only your best in-home partner. And I think if any family caregiver really needs to stress this to the professionals who care for your loved ones, we need your help as you need our help as you care for our loved ones. But we're under great stress ourselves. So celebrate us and help us as we care for our loved ones. give our loved ones the benefit of your wealth of knowledge, talent, and experience, but make sure you figure out how we're doing too. I will fearlessly develop a personal support system, friends and family. Remember that others also love my loved one and are willing to help if I would let them know what they can do to support my caregiving. So I have a little exercise here. One of the greatest challenges that we always have as family caregivers is that, people say, what can I do? And we push them away. We're not asking anybody to take over caregiving. We don't even know, a lot of times we don't want anybody in our, in our situation. And I always say, if you're the CEO of Caring for Your Loved One, Inc., you need to find people to help you do the elements of caregiving that don't have to do with the direct care of your loved one. So what I would say, and of course what Leslie would say, because she already put it on the screen, what you want to do is take a screen or a piece of paper and draw and do a T-bar across the top. This is what we call the reverse gift list. And nothing's better at the holidays than to be able to learn how to ask for gifts yourself. So title the second column, things they can do. Now in the people column, list the people who you think would do small, bite-sized, easy, manageable tasks for you. You're not asking anybody to take over caregiving. You're not asking anybody, to pay for things. You're just saying, maybe this is someone who could do me a small favor. And the things column, make a list of simple tasks which will help you and your loved one. Then match the task the person asked for your holiday gifts. So, Leslie, neighbor, cook dinner, for us once a month. Let's talk about anything but caregiving. My sister Linda, hey, you know what? When you go to the grocery store, or the neighbor, you go to the grocery store, you go to the pharmacy, stop by and see if I have a small list and the money, that maybe you can just help us out and get us a few things. A friend from work who always says, what can I do? Okay, come over and watch Dad for 2 hours while I just, watch TV. Come over one night and talk. We do this exercise at the Fearless Caregiver conferences, and the one thing, that most important thing I think that people always say is, and I don't care what city it is, this always comes up, I wish my sister would come and just do laundry with me and we could just hang out like we used to. Phyllis calls the insurance company. I learned this from a conversation with Dana Reeve, of course, Chris Reeve's widow, who passed away herself 10 years ago. And she said when he fell off the horse, they had a lot of insurance, but they had a lot of problems and it cost and a lot of insurance challenges. And she would always have the next call she had to make clipped to some basic information. And when someone would say, Dana, what can I do? She'd hand them the card and the information and say, could you make this call to the insurance company? And another one would be come over for one night to talk. So these are bite-sized, easy, manageable tasks that you would do for anybody and they would do for you. The list is endless, but we think about 10 is good. Now when people ask what they can do, or especially if they don't, you're ready with these tasks which will help you and honestly make them feel good for being able to do something. The most astounding thing is that once you become a good reverse gift list operator, you can accumulate about a day's worth of respite and support a month. That's a day to yourself. And respite can be achieved on a daily basis with the smallest of kindnesses. And respite doesn't have to be found outside. We're not saying go on take a cruise or go away. Having someone watch your loved one for a few hours while you luxuriate in a long hot bubble bath counts too. One last manifesto I want to talk about is I will fearlessly acknowledge when providing appropriate care for my loved one becomes impossible either due to concerns for their health conditions or my own, and seek other solutions for their caregiving needs. And this is, a lot of times it's very challenging for us, but unfortunately too many caregivers die from a combination of stress, depression, and ill health. And frankly, Stanford University about 10 years ago came out with a study that showed 40% of caregivers will die before the loved ones they care for, simply due to not being able to deal with the challenges of stress. So that just begs the question of who's going to care for both the caregiver and the loved ones when the caregivers become ill. It's extremely important to see yourself as a professional, as an equal member of your loved one's care team, and analyze what the next role is. I think the other thing that we realize now that wasn't available many years ago is there's a wider spectrum of care. It's not your loved one's at home or they're not. They're living somewhere else. It's a possibility of using the reverse gift list. It's a possibility of having some temporary aid and assistance come in. And there's some funds available for that. You want to contact, in particular, I would say the Aging and Disability Resource Center in your community. But there's even long-term care facilities where if you want to go away for a long weekend, they'll be happy to take care of your loved one. So there's a spectrum of care options. It's that I think we have to become experts in the opportunities available for us and our loved ones around our community and around the country. Am I good on time, Les?
Yeah, you're good. Would you like me to post some questions that have come in from people?
Oh, heck no. Yeah, sure.
I'm not cutting you off, am I?
No. That's I was going to, talk about, I think the one most important exercise we need, the one most important talent we need is to recognize and appreciate humor. There's so much humor that happens in caregiving situations that if you actually told your loved ones who aren't caregiving, they'd roll their eyes and wonder what was wrong with you. One in particular that comes to mind is a lady was at our Minneapolis Fearless Caregiver Conference, and she walked in and we were talking about humor, and she stood up and she said a few days previous to the event, she went to a long-term care facility where mom was living, and she asked her mom what she had for lunch earlier in the day, and her mom stared at her with all earnestness and said, "Dear, I have short-term memory disorder. Ask me tomorrow." So, I mean, there's so many of these stories that come up, but I think it's important to take a laugh when we have a chance to take a laugh.
Okay, well, I don't have any jokes, but I do have some questions. How's that? So, someone is asking if there is a correct balance between caring and controlling. How can caregivers ensure someone's safety without being controlling?
This is really important. This is a great question. I talk to people about this one all the time. It's the balance between safety and ensuring your loved one maintains their dignity. And it's a balance between infantilizing somebody who now can't handle all aspects of their life, and making sure that you become a partner with them. And it's challenging on all that, in all situations. And I especially with the holidays coming up, it's important to pay attention to how we interact and respond to our loved ones with other family members coming in, because our normal interactions and responses might actually be embarrassing to them. Two is, I think it's important to figure out I just did an interview with Melissa Manchester for the next cover, and she said something lovely about her mom who had a stroke. She said, it's important to figure out where dignity lies now with the person. So her mom can't do everything she could do before, but her mom also knows when you're disrespecting her or you're not sharing her dignity. So where does dignity lie? Is it a possibility that there are things your loved ones can do for themselves while keeping in the transparent bubble of protection that you offer? Is there a possibility that, even if there isn't, that you can talk to them, interact with them, be honest with them? So I think that's a grand question, because it affects you, it affects your loved ones, it affects your relationship with everybody, is to figure out, as you said, I think we're caring and controlling that balance. I think number one is safety. Number two is maintaining your loved one's dignity. And number three is, as I said, Melissa Mentor said, find out where dignity lies now.
Here we have another question from someone who has a hard time not feeling guilty when they need to take time for themselves, and wonders how common is this feeling?
Um, the big five: guilt, shame, fear, embarrassment, um, and there's another one. But these are the things that I think caregivers of anybody in the world don't deserve. They don't deserve it. Guilt is a thing that will get in your way of being a successful and fearless and and the best caregiver you can be for your loved one and yourself. And rather than let that enhance your guilt, you have to say, I am now taking on this job role. This job role is of being my loved one's fearless caregiver. I need to take that shame and fear, embarrassment, guilt, and put that aside as I would at work. That doesn't apply. So it's important. I think that's where support groups reign supreme, is to be able to talk with other people, because part of guilt is it's self-perpetuating. I'm guilty because I feel guilty, and I'm guilty that I'm still feeling guilty, and I'm feeling guilty about that. So if you could talk to other caregivers, if you can see how they handle that piece of the puzzle of caregiving, if you can have somebody to talk about this with who isn't just trying to fix things all the time because they're going through it too, it's vitally important. Guilt is the least important thing you need to be a successful caregiver for your loved one.
So, do you have any advocacy strategies for caregivers of affected children within the various service provider agencies, educational
Yeah,
RCs? I don't know
go
what
ahead, I'm sorry.
I don't know what RCs are, but
Here's the thing. If we see ourselves as a panicked loved one, that's how the care providers are going to see us, and they're going to put us in a little box and put us aside and not deal with us. If we see ourselves as an equal member of our loved one's care team, and actually I find that you're more important than the doctor. You can fire the doctor can't fire you. And if you can see yourself as a professional and try to have that professional distance that professional caregiver has, and realize that, I'll give you an example, the doctors. You know, we go into the doctor's office, and they only have 8 minutes for the most part to keep on schedule to diagnose and deal and manage medications with your loved ones, and they should be out. And if you kind of drag them by the coattails and say, I've got these 15 questions for you, you will not be treated with respect, and they're not going to give you the time you need. My best example is talking again with the doctor. You have questions. You're taking notes throughout the time of your caregiving. You know what your questions you're going to have when you go to the doctor's office. Call the office first. See if maybe this is not a question the doctor needs to answer or can answer. See if research needs to be done. Tell them you'll have a question or two for the doctor at the end of the session. Remind the doctor you have those questions, and then put a small portable tape recorder on the counter when they start talking. So how you deal with the system is to be an equal member of the care team, is to learn the phrase, who's your supervisor, is to learn everything you can about your rights and your loved one's rights within the healthcare system, and to just, again, be professional. Because if you're not seeing what the system offers, and you're not being, an equal professional with your loved one, they're going to do everything they can not to give you what you need.
so Gary, do you have any tips about medical binders, or I guess organizing medical records?
Oh, yeah, this is a big issue. We write about this all the time. As a matter of fact, tomorrow on our caregiver.com newsletter, we do the series during the holidays called a board of directors meetings e-blast. In other words, the kind of things you need to talk with your loved ones when they fly in for the holidays, and try to tell you what you're supposed to do and then fly out. So every week we're offering different advice, and this this week on Wednesday, we're talking about the value of organization, the value of seeing yourself as a professional. My mom, when she cared for my dad and my grandparents, would put it on everything she needed on big legal pads, and you know, by the fourth year, she had a closet full of legal pads. You can't organize, you can't communicate, you don't want to be on the phone all the time with your family members, and also it's important for you if on an average where our loved ones are having 5 to 7 doctors and 7 to 20 medications. So you can't keep that in your head. So yes, it's very important to take a look at what the new medication binders. I think there's online systems. I think we talk about one in particular tomorrow. There's communication systems. There's a way for you to interact with your doctor's office, and you have to be organized. I know she's saying medical binders, or he's saying medical binders, but it's all about professional organization as a family caregiver, and you find the right tool that works for you. And there's a bunch of things out there now, and you take advantage of it.
And I think our final question, and this is, there's no question mark. Okay, so outline routines for daily living outside resources to help provide positive daily or weekly outings, meal planning. What do you have to say about that list?
That's a bunch of words.
Yeah.
Routines for daily living, outside resources to help promote positive daily or weekly outings, and meal planning. Oh my God, that's where your organization shines. They need to talk to you guys. They need to get on your website. They need to go to your conferences. And meal planning, I understand that we have a caregiver kitchen on caregiver.com, which turns out to be one of the most popular parts of the site, because it's one of the biggest challenges we have as family caregivers. Positive daily or weekly outings. Again, that's specific to the abilities of your loved ones, but that's where I think, again, support groups or meetup groups or being with other caregivers come in handy. And routines for daily living, I think you're a better answerer for that than I am.
I'll have to think about that. But we do have information on our website about.
But I'm really honestly glad that I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, I know that you often have information about dysphagia, and I was wondering if you on your website have a diet for people who have issues, swallowing issues.
It's funny you mention that, because I think we do have a section in the caregiver kitchen about dysphagia. We've had we have a swallowing disorders channel on caregiver.com, and we've had experts on our panels at the Fearless Caregiver conferences, because that's something that cuts across a lot of care situations.
Mm-hmm.
So I think between the kitchen, between the swallowing disorders channel on caregiver.com, and if anybody's in a city where we're doing a conference, we're probably talking about dysphagia.
Okay, well, maybe that's a good transition. This is a screen grab from your website.
Yep.
And I have highlighted.
Here's the key about the newsletter, Les. It's sure we talk to the experts, and absolutely right. We write newsletters and e-blasts. But the most important thing, I think, is it's the advice, the information that we learn from the family caregivers who we meet on the road, because that's where the wisdom lies. I mean, some caregiver somewhere has a piece of the puzzle you've been looking for, and you have a piece of puzzle they've been looking for. And so we're really thrilled to come back from an event and fill the newsletters with the advice that we got from the family caregivers we've met on the road. And it's free.
Well, Gary, any closing comments or final words?
Well, I hate to say this to a family caregiver because we're, they're the last people who want to hear this, but the real heroes in the healthcare system, the real heroes are the family caregiver. The family caregiver is the one who stands up and says, I'm going to do this, I'm going to take care of this, I'm going to handle this. But my advice is to see yourself as a loving professional, see yourself as an equal member of the care team, and to be able to learn everything you can about your loved one's healthcare condition. Learn what you can to partner with the other members of the care team, and learn what you can about caring for yourself, because then that's the best way, I think, to be a family caregiver, is to see yourself as a fearless caregiver.
Well, thank you so much, Gary, for spending time with us.
Well, it was fun. Thank you, Les.
And we have just a few final things to tell you about before we bring this webinar to a close. If you're interested in joining us for our final webinar of 2013, it's happening in just a couple of weeks, Thursday, December 9th at 4 p.m. Pacific and 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. It's coping with depression associated with having a chronic health condition. And you can go to our website under webinars and sign up for it. You have to register for each individual webinar. So even though you participated in this one, you'll have to register for the depression one separately. We have a warm line feature that hopefully you're all familiar with, and you can fill out a form on the website, a warm line request. I want to thank you very much for your participation, and I hope to have you visit us in December for our final webinar of the year. Thank you very much.